The birth of a civilization. The gift of the Nile. Let your mind drift, softly now, back in time, to a land where golden sands kissed the river's edge, and life whispered from the water's flow. Long before there were empires and kings, before temples and pyramids stretched toward the sun, there was a river, ancient, eternal, and divine. The Nile. It did not roar like other rivers. It hummed, it glided, and it gave life, endlessly. This river was more than a body of water. It was the very heartbeat of the land. Flowing from the heart of Africa, it carved a green ribbon through a desert of gold. Where its waters touched, the earth turned rich and black, soil unlike any other, so fertile that seeds would burst into grain with only the kiss of the flood. And so, the people came. They didn't come as conquerors. They came as gatherers and fishers, humble and hopeful. They built huts of reeds and mud brick, shaped tools from flint and bone, and learned to listen to the rhythm of the Nile, its slow rise, its generous retreat. In the dry months, the river shrank back into itself, leaving behind a quilt of cracked land. But when the rains fell far to the south, the Nile swelled like a sleeping giant stirring, creeping slowly over its banks, wrapping the land in muddy nourishment. The people waited, and they watched, knowing the flood brought both danger and blessing. And in this waiting, in this watching, they began to believe. They whispered that the river was a god, a gift sent by the sky. They named it Happy, the Lord of the Flood. They made offerings of bread and beer, hoping Happy would smile upon their villages and not take too much. They prayed for just enough. Not too little, not too much, just enough. Over time, the rhythm of the Nile shaped everything. It became their calendar, their map, their way of life. Without it, Egypt was only dust. With it, Egypt was born. The river taught them patience. It taught them order. And from that order came civilization. So when you think of pyramids, pharaohs, and golden tombs, remember this. None of it could exist without the river that whispered life through the desert. The Nile, the giver, the guardian, the gift. Breathe slowly now. The river still flows in your memory. Let's float gently onward. Early settlements on the riverbanks. Before the glory, there was gathering. Before temples, there were tents. The earliest Egyptians didn't arrive in crowds. They came in families, in clusters, following game trails and migrating birds, watching the stars and listening for the river's voice. They built their homes close to the water, never too far, never too close, for the river could be generous, but it could also surprise. These homes were not grand. Woven reeds bound together. Mud shaped by hand. Roofs made of palm fronds. Each home a small shelter from the heat and sand. A place for sleep, for stories, for dreams. People lived close to one another. Clusters of families turned into villages, and villages shared food, tools, and laughter. Children ran barefoot along the banks, splashing in the shallows. Dogs barked. Fires crackled at twilight. And in the early morning, the women carried water jars on their heads while the men cast nets or worked in the fields. There were no walls yet, no kings, but there was community. The people learned to read the signs in the sky. When Sirius, the dog star, rose just before the sun, they knew the flood would soon arrive. They learned to dig small canals, to guide the water gently into the soil. They stored grain in baskets woven so tightly not even a single kernel could escape. In these simple settlements, knowledge passed not through writing, but through whisper, grandmother to grandchild, father to son. They spoke of the animals, the spirits, the seasons. They respected the land and feared the flood. These were the humble roots of something vast. No monuments remain from these villages. No gold. No statues. Only pottery shards and flint tools, buried in silence beneath the modern world. But here, in these quiet beginnings, the spirit of Egypt was born. The role of the desert. Beyond the reach of the river's green arms, the desert stretched, endless and silent. Some feared it, others respected it, but all understood its power. The Egyptians called it Deshret, the Red Land. It wasn't just a place of sand. It was the border between order and chaos, life and death, Egypt and the unknown. To the east, the desert met the rising sun. It was where the spirits were born. To the west, the sun set, the realm of the dead. The western desert became a resting place, where tombs were carved into cliffs and sealed with prayers. But the desert was not only death. It protected Egypt like a fortress. Invaders found its heat and emptiness unbearable. While other ancient lands fell to endless wars, Egypt stood guarded by its burning seas of sand. In this way, the desert gave life by preserving it. Still, people crossed it. Brave traders and miners, nomads and messengers. They followed stars and left offerings at lonely shrines, hoping the spirits of the desert would not steal their breath. The desert gave up gifts: copper, turquoise, and gold. Mines were dug into its bones. Small caravans crept through its dunes, whispering to each other at night around flickering flames, shielding their faces from the wind. To the ancient Egyptians, the desert wasn't empty. It was alive, filled with jinn and gods, whispers and warnings. A place where the soul wandered after death, or was lost forever. And so, they respected the Red Land. They feared it, and they thanked it. It kept chaos at bay, and made the Green Valley more precious. Farming and the first villages. Let us walk into the fields now, where the stalks of emmer wheat sway gently in the breeze. Where bare feet press into moist soil. Where birds call out overhead, and the quiet click of sickles fills the air. The first Egyptian farmers were careful and clever. They learned to plant just after the flood receded, when the earth was damp and black. They grew barley and wheat, lentils and flax. They raised goats and cattle, ducks and geese. Each animal had its purpose. Each plant its season. Women ground grain with stone, kneeling on earthen floors. Children helped carry water in clay pots. The air smelled of soil, sweat, and fresh bread. Villages grew along the river like pearls on a necklace. Each one independent, yet connected, by trade, by marriage, by memory. The people spoke in shared rhythms, offering thanks to the river that fed them. They built granaries to store food, and with food came time. Time to think, to carve, to build, to dream. The first temples were no more than shaded altars. The first statues were carved not for kings, but for gods of the earth and sky. And slowly, among the farmers, leaders rose, the strongest, the wisest, the ones who could call the flood or calm the crowd. Farming didn't just feed the people. It gave birth to structure, to society, to the rhythm of Egypt's ancient heart. Shukriya. AB Hum heading 1Ka Safar subheading 1.5 Se 1.10 Takbina Ruke continuously Yori Raktahain. AAP Eram Sesante Rahie, Ankan Band Karliji. Or ISS Purani Miti Ki Kahanian Mine Ko J. The birth of hieroglyphs. There was a time before writing. A time when stories floated on breath alone, passed from mouth to ear. But the people of the Nile, they wanted more. They wanted memory to live beyond the storyteller. They wanted to etch time into stone. And so, from drawings in the sand and carvings on bone, writing was born, hieroglyphs. Sacred carvings. Not just symbols, but spirits. Each one danced with meaning, with sound, with magic. They believed words were alive, that to write a name was to call its soul into the world. Hieroglyphs weren't invented all at once. First, came the images, a bird for flight, a sun for light, a ripple for water. Over time, these pictures became sounds. The owl meant M. The vulture? It wasn't a bird. It was a letter. Priests guarded the secrets of writing. They were the scribes, the sacred memory keepers. Trained from childhood, they dipped reed pens into black and red ink and wrote on papyrus, thin sheets made from river reeds. Scrolls unfolded like snakes, lined with the whispers of time. Every symbol had a purpose. Every mark a spell. They wrote prayers, inventories, love letters, curses. They carved names into temple walls and tombs, believing that as long as a name was written, it would never be forgotten. To erase a name was to destroy a soul. And so writing became sacred, eternal, a bridge between this world and the next. A river of thought flowing through stone and scroll. The hieroglyph spoke, and Egypt listened. The rise of city-states. As more villages sprouted along the Nile, they began to grow not just in number, but in complexity. Some became centers of trade, others of religion. With time, these clusters became city-states, early kingdoms ruled by local leaders called chieftains or nomarchs. Each city-state had its own emblem, its own patron deity, its own story. They traded with neighbors, sometimes allied, sometimes clashed. They built walls, dug canals, and organized armies of laborers. Some cities became famous: Nekhen, in the south, the city of the falcon god Horus, and Buto, in the north, home of the cobra goddess Wadjet. Each held sacred ground, powerful myths, and ambitious leaders. The rivalry between Upper Egypt, the south, and Lower Egypt, the north, grew. Two lands, two crowns, two visions of Egypt. And yet, a quiet yearning began to stir in the hearts of the people. A desire for unity, for one Egypt. The city-states laid the foundation, politically, spiritually, culturally, for what would come next. A nation that would endure for thousands of years. But for now, the land remained divided, a mosaic of power, each city its own sun rising over the Nile. The first kings and unification. Somewhere around 3100 BCE, one man changed everything. His name was Nama, though some knew him as Mens. He was a king from the south, a warrior, a symbol, a myth. And he dreamed of uniting the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, under one crown. He marched north with determination, banners raised, soldiers following like shadows. Battles were fought, blood spilled into the sand. And when the dust settled, Nama stood victorious. He wore the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, together a symbol of unity. He created a new capital, Memphis, the balance of the two lands, where north met south and the Nile split the world in two. The unification wasn't just political. It was spiritual. The gods were reconciled, the calendars merged, the language woven together into one royal thread. On the Nama palette, carved in slate, we see his triumph. On one side, he towers over an enemy, ready to strike. On the other, he walks in procession, flanked by standards and symbols. A record not just of victory, but of birth. The birth of Egypt as a nation. From this moment on, the king was not just a man. He was divine, a living god on earth. The pharaoh, and the people believed, not out of fear, but from centuries of dreaming. They had waited for unity, and now it had come. Egypt was one, a single body, a single heart, and it beat in rhythm with the Nile. Tools, pottery, and technology. Though often forgotten beneath the shadow of pyramids, the tools of daily life were masterpieces in their own right, quiet inventions that made greatness possible. The earliest Egyptians were artisans. They chipped flint into knives so sharp they could cut a strand of hair. They shaped clay into pots, not just to hold food, but to carry culture. Pottery was painted, patterned, and fired with care. Bronze had not yet reached their hands, but still they built. With copper tools, they dug canals and carved wood. With wooden sleds, they moved massive stones. With simple pulleys and counterweights, they raised beams into place. Weaving was an art. Threads of flax twisted into linen so fine it shimmered in sunlight. Their clothing was light, clean, and worn with pride. And mathematics? It blossomed like the lotus. They measured floods, marked time, counted cattle. They used ropes knotted at regular intervals to survey land, early geometry born from the Nile's ebb and flow. Their calendar had 365 days. They observed the stars. They understood proportion, balance, symmetry, not just in building, but in belief. Technology to them was not metal and wires. It was harmony, with nature, with spirit, with the seasons. And with these tools, humble, patient, precise, they built the foundations of an empire. Religion and early gods. In Egypt, the divine was everywhere, in the sun, in the river, in the wind that kissed the palms. The people didn't just worship gods, they lived with them. Their first gods were not distant or cruel. They were close, like family. There was Ra, the sun god, who sailed across the sky each day in his golden boat, then fought the serpent of darkness each night. There was Osiris, the green-skinned god of life and death, and his loving sister-wife, Isis, the great mother, whose tears made the Nile rise. Horus, the falcon, watched from above. Anubis, the jackal, guarded the dead. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, kept time and wisdom. And many more, gods of frogs, cats, cobras, crocodiles, each with stories, temples, priests. Religion wasn't just ritual. It was rhythm. Each day began with offerings. Every season had festivals. Every act of farming, building, bathing, all was sacred. People wore amulets for protection. They whispered prayers over bread. They believed the world was held in balance by Ma'at, truth, justice, harmony. To disturb this balance was to invite chaos. So they lived carefully, respectfully, watching the stars, listening to dreams. Their gods were their neighbors, their guides, their hope. Burial practices and the afterlife. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end. It was a doorway, a passage, a return to the stars. They believed that within every person lived a Ka, a life force, and a Ba, a soul with wings. When the body died, these parts could live on, if they were cared for. And so they prepared. Burials began simply, shallow pits in the desert, bodies wrapped in linen, surrounded by food and pottery. But even then, care was taken. The body was positioned on its side, facing west, toward the land of the dead, where the sun slept. Later, tombs were dug deeper, chambers built, walls painted with scenes of daily life, fishing, feasting, farming, so the soul would remember joy. In time, mummification emerged, a sacred art. The body was cleansed, its organs removed and placed in jars guarded by divine animals. The heart, the seat of the soul, was kept whole. The brain, removed and discarded. For they believed the heart did the thinking. Wrapped in hundreds of linen layers, the body was sealed in a coffin, sometimes painted with spells, names, and faces. The Book of the Dead, not a single book, but a collection of incantations, was placed beside the mummy to guide the soul through the underworld. Past serpents, lakes of fire, and gates guarded by spirits. At the final judgment, the heart was weighed against a feather. If it was light, the soul could pass. If heavy, it was devoured by a mit, the soul eater. But they believed, deeply, that with the right rituals, the right words, the right heart, one could live forever among the stars. And so they buried not just bodies, but dreams, wrapped in linen, sealed in stone, whispered to the sky. The Old Kingdom and the Age of Pyramids. Djoser and the Step Pyramid. Long before the giant pyramids pierced the horizon of Giza, there stood one structure that changed everything. It was not the tallest pyramid, nor the most famous, but it was the very first. The Step Pyramid of Saqqara. It was built for a king named Djoser, and designed by a man whose name still resonates, Imhotep. Djoser's reign marked the dawn of the Third Dynasty, around 2667 BCE. Egypt was transitioning from scattered traditions to something unified, divine, and eternal. Kings no longer wanted just tombs. They wanted monuments, symbols that would echo in the halls of time. Imhotep, Djoser's architect and high priest, envisioned something no one had ever tried. He transformed the mastaba, a flat, box-like tomb, into something revolutionary. He stacked 6 mastabas on top of one another, forming the very first step pyramid. At Saqqara, miles south of modern Cairo, they laid down the white limestone. Tier by tier, the monument rose. Not only the central pyramid, but also an entire mortuary complex. Temples, courtyards, gateways, shrines, all designed to serve the king in his journey to the afterlife. This wasn't just construction. It was sacred architecture. It declared the king divine. It linked him to the sun god Ra, who rose in steps across the sky. The step pyramid stood as a stairway to the stars, a sign that pharaohs were more than rulers, they were gods on earth. It still stands today, more than 4,600 years later, a silent, stone testament to ancient genius. The reign of Sneferu. After Djoser came decades of experimentation. But it was under Sneferu, the founder of the 4th dynasty, that pyramid building became an art form. Sneferu reigned for about 48 years. He wasn't just a military leader or a wise ruler. He was a builder pharaoh. Under his rule, Egypt entered a golden age of stability, prosperity, and construction. He began with the Maiden Pyramid, once thought to be a step pyramid that was later converted into a smooth-sided one. Unfortunately, its outer casing collapsed, possibly even during construction. Yet, instead of abandoning the dream, Sneferu tried again. Next came the bent pyramid at Dashur. A marvel of ancient engineering, it rises sharply before its angle suddenly softens, as if bowing to the sky. Why the bend? Most likely a design correction. The angle was too steep, and cracks appeared during construction. So the builders adjusted midway, preventing collapse. And then, Sneferu's masterpiece, the Red Pyramid, also at Dashur. It was Egypt's first successful true pyramid, with smooth sides from base to tip, rising 341 feet into the desert air. This structure laid the blueprint for every pyramid that followed, including the Great Pyramid itself. Sneferu's reign was one of experimentation, evolution, and achievement. He was the father of the true pyramid, and his legacy is carved in red limestone, glowing still beneath the Egyptian sun. The Great Pyramid of Khufu. And then came the wonder. Khufu, Sneferu's son, ascended the throne and decided to outdo his father. He would build not just a pyramid, but the greatest pyramid the world has ever known. At the Giza Plateau, rising above the west bank of the Nile, Khufu's workers began what seemed impossible. Over 2 million blocks of limestone, each weighing between 2 and 15 tons, were hauled and stacked to create a structure 481 feet tall. The Great Pyramid of Giza. Built around 2560 BCE, it stood as the tallest man-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. The scale is staggering. Its base covers 13 acres. Its sides are aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal points of the compass. And yet, no mortar holds the stones together. Just precision, craftsmanship, genius. Inside, a labyrinth of chambers and passages. The king's chamber, with its granite sarcophagus. The queen's chamber, perhaps symbolic, perhaps functional. And the grand gallery, a sloped corridor of astonishing height and engineering. How was it built? Ramps? Levers? Manpower? We still debate. But one thing is clear, it was not just a tomb. It was a celestial machine, aligned with the stars, designed to launch the soul of the pharaoh into eternity. Khufu's pyramid wasn't just great. It was eternal. The builders of Giza, workers, not slaves. For years, people believed the pyramids were built by slaves, whipped and chained under the blazing sun. Hollywood loved the idea. But archaeology tells a different story. The pyramids, especially those at Giza, were built by well-fed, well-housed laborists, working in rotating shifts. These were not slaves. They were skilled workers, possibly farmers during the Nile's flooding season when fields were underwater. At Giza, archaeologists found workers' villages, bakeries, breweries, dormitories. They discovered thousands of animal bones, suggesting the workers ate meat regularly, a luxury in ancient Egypt. Graffiti inside the pyramids show the names of work gangs, the Friends of Khufu, the Drunkards of Menkaure. These were teams who took pride in their labor, even leaving their marks deep within the Great Pyramid. It wasn't slavery. It was national service, an honor to help build the home of a god-king. They hauled stone, shaped blocks, aligned edges with impossible accuracy. It took tens of thousands of workers, decades of planning, and genius logistics. The pyramids were a collective triumph, the result of vision, teamwork, and belief in divine destiny. Khafra and the Sphinx. Southwest of Khufu's pyramid stands another marvel, the Pyramid of Khafra. Slightly smaller than his father's, but standing on higher ground, it appears just as grand. Its apex still holds some of the original casing stones, a reminder of how all pyramids once gleamed white under the sun. Khafra, Khufu's son, also left behind a monument unlike any other, the Great Sphinx. Carved from a single mass of limestone, the Sphinx stretches 240 feet in length and stands 66 feet tall. It has the body of a lion and the face of a king, likely Khafra himself. What was it for? A guardian? A symbol of royal power? A representation of divine wisdom? It faces east, toward the rising sun. A sentinel watching dawn after dawn, age after age. Wind, sand, and time have weathered its face. Its nose, long gone, but its mystery remains. Who carved it? How? Why? No inscription answers these questions. And that silence is part of the Sphinx's allure, a monument that guards secrets as fiercely as it once guarded pharaohs' tombs. Menkaure and the smaller pyramid. After Khafra came Menkaure, the last of the great pyramid builders at Giza. His pyramid is the smallest of the three, but what it lacks in size, it makes up for in elegance, symbolism, and artistic refinement. The Pyramid of Menkaure rises to a height of about 213 feet, far shorter than his predecessors. It was once sheathed in rich red granite, especially along the lower courses. The granite glistened under the Egyptian sun, giving his tomb a royal hue, symbolic of power, eternity, and blood. But Menkaure wasn't simply about grandeur. His legacy rests not only in stone, but in the statues and art that have survived. Among the most iconic pieces of Egyptian sculpture, now housed in museums, are statues of Menkaure standing beside goddesses, or his queen, Khamenei II. These statues reveal a softer portrayal of kingship, graceful posture, serene expression, unity between ruler and divine feminine. Unlike his father and grandfather, Menkaure's pyramid complex was never completed in his lifetime. His successor, possibly his son, tried to finish it with mud brick instead of stone, perhaps a sign of changing times or declining resources. Still, his pyramid, and the art that came with it, shows that the Old Kingdom's greatness was not just in brawn and scale, but in balance and beauty. Sun temples and the cult of Ra. As the pyramids rose, so too did a new force in Egyptian religious life, the sun god Ra. By the time of the 5th dynasty, kings were not just building pyramids, they were also building sun temples, open-air structures designed to honor Ra, the solar deity who journeyed across the sky each day and through the underworld at night. These sun temples, like those built by Userkaf and Nayuser, featured massive obelisks and altar courts, where the sun's rays could touch stone unimpeded. Unlike pyramids, these temples were not enclosed. They welcomed the heavens. They were shaped by light, shadow, and time. The cult of Ra became dominant. Pharaohs began calling themselves sons of Ra. Their divine legitimacy no longer rested solely in their lineage, but in their direct connection to the solar god. The movement of the sun across the sky mirrored the soul's journey through the afterlife. Even the pyramids were designed with this in mind. They were aligned with celestial bodies, with shafts pointing toward constellations like Orion and the Pole Star, thought to guide the pharaoh's soul. The shift towards solar theology did not replace older beliefs, but it reshaped them. It brought new rituals, new architecture, and a new cosmic story, one where Pharaoh was not just king on earth, but navigator of the sky. Pyramid texts and afterlife beliefs. Within the pyramids of the later Old Kingdom, especially from the 5th dynasty onward, we find something new: words. Carved on the walls of burial chambers, these are the pyramid texts, the oldest known religious writings in the world. They are not stories in the way we think of myths, but spells, incantations, and instructions. Their purpose? To guide the deceased pharaoh through the complex journey of the afterlife. The texts speak of ascension to the sky, joining the sun god, avoiding dangers, and transforming into birds, stars, or gods. They offer magical protections, invoke deities, and proclaim the king's immortality. These texts were exclusive. Only the king received them. Ordinary people had no such access. The pharaoh's soul was to become one with the gods, rise with Ra, and rule forever among the imperishable stars. One of the most profound messages in the pyramid texts is this: death is not an end. It is a transition, a voyage. And the pyramid, with its sacred geometry and celestial alignments, was the vessel. Centuries later, these texts would evolve into the coffin texts, and then the Book of the Dead, opening the spiritual journey to more than just royalty. But it all began here, in cold stone corridors, etched in hieroglyphs that whispered of eternity. Daily life in the Pyramid Age. While kings built immortality in stone, millions lived ordinary, yet fascinating, lives beneath the desert sun. The Old Kingdom wasn't just about pyramids. It was a complex society with farmers, scribes, priests, bakers, brewers, potters, and artists. Life revolved around the Nile, whose predictable floods fed the fields and created the agricultural rhythm of the land. Farmers toiled during the growing season. When the Nile flooded, they often worked on state projects like pyramid construction. They paid taxes in grain and labor. Artisans worked in bustling workshops near royal tombs, carving statues, crafting amulets, painting tomb walls. Their tools were simple: copper chisels, stone hammers, wooden mallets. Yet their results were breathtaking. Priests managed temples, performed rituals, and interpreted omens. They held immense power, especially as the cult of Ra and Osiris grew. Women had surprising rights. They could own property, inherit land, initiate divorce. Queens and noblewomen often wielded influence, and goddesses like Isis and Ether were widely revered. In villages, life was communal. Children played. Elders told stories. Bread was baked in dome ovens. Beer brewed in clay jars. Despite the mystery of monuments, the heartbeat of Egypt pulsed in its people, who dreamed, laughed, prayed, and grieved under the same stars as their pharaohs. The collapse of the Old Kingdom. For centuries, the Old Kingdom stood tall. But then, everything fell apart. By the end of the 6th dynasty, Egypt descended into chaos. Central authority collapsed. Nomarchs, regional governors, became more powerful than pharaohs. Drought struck. The Nile failed to flood. Crops died. Famine spread. Inscriptions from the time speak of despair. The sky rained no water. The earth bore no grain. Men were few, and the dead were more than the living. Tomb robbing increased. Temples were abandoned. Pharaohs lost divine mystique. The final blow came as PP II, the last long-reigning king, outlived many of his heirs. Succession crises followed. Civil unrest boiled over. This era, known as the First Intermediate Period, marked a fragmentation of power. Local lords ruled their own domains. Egypt split, no longer one kingdom, but many quarreling fiefdoms. Yet, out of this darkness would eventually rise new dynasties, new gods, and new dreams. But for now, the age of the pyramids ended. The monuments remained, silent, eternal. But the kings who built them were no longer divine. The golden age had faded into stone and sand. Gods and myths of ancient Egypt. Osiris, the god of the dead. Long ago, when the world was young and still finding its rhythm, there ruled a just and noble god named Osiris. He was more than a deity. He was the beating heart of Egypt's mythic memory. To the ancient Egyptians, Osiris represented the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, the eternal promise that death was not the end, but a passage. Osiris was said to have once walked the earth as a wise and beloved king, bringing laws, agriculture, and civility to a chaotic land. His skin was often shown in green, the color of rebirth and fertile Nile silt, and he wore the Atef crown, flanked by 2 ostrich feathers, symbols of divine balance. But peace cannot endure without envy. Osiris's brother, Set, god of chaos and the desert, grew bitter and jealous. One day, he tricked Osiris into lying in a coffin crafted perfectly to his shape. Once Osiris lay inside, Set sealed the lid and cast it into the Nile, condemning his brother to death. But death was not the end for Osiris. His devoted wife, Isis, searched the earth for his body. When she found it, she used magic and love to restore Osiris. He did not return to the world of the living, but instead became lord of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. From there, he presided over the dead, not with fear, but with justice and compassion. Every pharaoh who died was said to become one with Osiris. In this myth, the people of Egypt found solace. Death was not destruction. It was transformation. Osiris, serene, wise, enduring, stood as the eternal judge, welcoming souls to their next journey. Isis, the divine mother. If Osiris was the noble king, Isis was the eternal queen of magic and motherhood. She was no mere consort. Isis was worshipped across Egypt, and far beyond its borders, as a healer, protector, and goddess of divine love. Her image, seated on a throne or nursing her infant son Horus, echoed for millennia, influencing even later portrayals of the Madonna and Child. Isis was a goddess of tenacity and tenderness. When Osiris was slain and his body scattered across Egypt by Set, it was Isis who traveled far and wide, reassembling her beloved piece by piece. With the help of Nephthys, her sister, and Anubis, guardian of the dead, she brought Osiris back through sacred rites and incantations. She then conceived Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship, while Osiris lingered in the underworld. Isis raised Horus in secret, hiding him from Set's wrath, teaching him justice, strength, and divine right. Isis's magic was unmatched. In one legend, she even outwitted the sun god Ra, learning his secret name and gaining power no other god held. But Isis was not feared. She was loved. Women prayed to her for fertility and safety in childbirth. Sailors carved her image onto ships for safe passage. Her temples, such as the Grand Sanctuary at Philae, remained active even after Egyptian religion faded. To call Isis a mother is only part of her truth. She was the heart of resurrection, the whisper of magic in the night, the ever-watchful presence guiding the soul through pain and into peace. Anubis and the Afterlife. In the quiet hours after death, when the breath has stilled and silence hangs heavy, it is Anubis who arrives first. Jackal-headed and solemn, Anubis is the guardian of tombs, the embalmer of kings, and the divine guide to the afterlife. With sleek black fur, the color of the fertile Nile soil and symbolic of rebirth, he protected the bodies of the dead and ensured their journey was safe and sacred. Long before Osiris ruled the underworld, Anubis was its first warden. He taught humanity the secrets of mummification, turning death from decay into divine preservation. Priests who performed embalming rituals wore masks in his image, calling upon his steady hands and sacred knowledge. Anubis was not cruel, nor warm. He was calm, meticulous, eternal. In the Hall of Two Truths, it was Anubis who led the soul to judgment, weighing their heart against the feather of Marat, the goddess of truth. His presence ensured balance, no bribes, no deceit. If the heart was heavy with sin, the soul would be devoured by Amit, the devourer of the dead. If light and pure, the soul passed on to paradise, the field of reeds. Anubis was both feared and revered. His presence near cemeteries and tombs kept robbers at bay and reminded mourners that death was not the end, only a crossing. With his gaze forever fixed on the horizon between worlds, Anubis remains the silent sentinel of the sacred dead. Horus and the sky. Above the vast desert and shimmering Nile, a falcon soars, eyes sharp, wings wide. This is Horus, god of the sky, vengeance, and rightful kingship. Son of Isis and Osiris, Horus was born in hiding. As a child, he was protected by spells, gods, and creatures of the marshes. He grew strong, not only in body but in purpose, destined to avenge his father and reclaim the throne from Set. When Horus came of age, he stood before the gods and challenged Set. What followed was a mythic struggle, a battle fought across deserts, skies, and rivers. In some tales, they fought for 80 years, changing form, shifting powers, locked in eternal combat. Set was brute force and chaos. Horus was will and order. During these battles, Horus lost his left eye, torn out by Set. But the gods restored it, and it became the Eye of Horus, a symbol of healing, protection, and wholeness. Eventually, the gods chose Horus as the rightful ruler of Egypt. Every pharaoh thereafter claimed to be the living Horus, ruling the land as he once did. Horus is often depicted with the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, his falcon eyes watching both land and sky. His eye became one of the most sacred amulets in Egypt, painted on coffins, ships, and walls to ward off evil and restore health. In Horus, we find the ideal of the just king, the eternal warrior, the guardian of balance between chaos and harmony. Set, chaos, and betrayal. In the endless dance of order and chaos, one figure looms dark and unpredictable. Set, god of storms, violence, and disorder. Set was not a god of evil in the way later cultures would define it. He was the embodiment of necessary chaos, the desert wind that scours and reshapes, the unpredictable storm, the force that opposes, challenges, disrupts. Yet his story is one of betrayal. As the brother of Osiris and Isis, Set once held a rightful place among the gods. But jealousy poisoned him. When he saw the people and gods honor Osiris, envy festered. He devised a cruel game, a beautiful coffin, promised to whomever fit it perfectly. When Osiris lay down, Set and his followers sealed it shut, ending the reign of order and plunging Egypt into mourning. Set dismembered Osiris and scattered his body. He hunted Horus and tried to claim the throne. In some versions, Set even assaults Horus during their mythic war, employing trickery, disguise, and brute strength. And yet, Set was not banished forever. In some tales, he defends Ra's solar boat against the serpent of chaos, Apep, each night. He is destruction, but also the shield against greater destruction. Set's duality is Egypt's understanding of the universe. Even chaos has a role. Even storms pass. He was feared, yes, but also respected. For without Set, the balance of Ma'at, the cosmic order, could not truly exist. The weighing of the heart. In the quiet stillness of the afterlife, the soul's fate is decided in the Hall of Two Truths, where the ritual known as the weighing of the heart takes place. This sacred ceremony, presided over by Anubis, determines if the deceased may enter the eternal paradise or face oblivion. Before the gods, the heart of the departed is carefully placed on one side of a giant scale, while on the other rests the feather of Ma'at, symbolizing truth, justice, and cosmic order. The heart is more than just an organ. It is believed to be the seat of the person's soul, their conscience, and their moral being. If the heart is heavy with sin, weighted down by lies, greed, or cruelty, it will tip the scale. Such a heart is deemed unworthy. The fearsome creature Amit, part lion, part hippopotamus, and part crocodile, waits hungrily to devour the soul, ending its journey forever. But if the heart is light, balanced, and pure, it means the person lived in harmony with Ma'at. The soul is then granted passage to the field of reeds, an eternal paradise mirroring the earthly Nile's lushness and fertility. The weighing of the heart was a profound reminder to the Egyptians. Their lives, their actions, and their honor mattered deeply. Every kind word, every just deed, every truth spoken echoed into eternity. Sacred animals and symbols. The ancient Egyptians saw the divine in the natural world, especially in animals. Many gods were depicted with animal heads or associated with specific creatures, each carrying deep spiritual symbolism. The falcon, for instance, represented Horus, the sky god and protector of kings. Its keen eyesight and majestic flight symbolized vigilance and divine kingship. The jackal was linked to Anubis, guardian of the dead and guide of souls, embodying protection and the mystery of the afterlife. The cat, revered and sometimes feared, was associated with Bastet, goddess of home, fertility, and protection. Cats were sacred, often mummified and buried with their owners. The scarab beetle was a symbol of rebirth and regeneration, connected to Khepri, the god who rolled the sun across the sky each day. Symbols like the ankh represented life itself, the jed pillar stood for stability, and the scepter signified power. These sacred animals and symbols were woven into daily life, in amulets, temple decorations, and tumat, reminding Egyptians constantly of the unseen divine forces shaping their world. Temples as homes of the gods. Temples in ancient Egypt were not just buildings. They were living homes for the gods. Built with immense care and grandeur, temples were sacred spaces where the divine presence was invited to dwell. They stood as bridges between the mortal and immortal realms. Only priests and pharaohs could enter the inner sanctuaries, where statues of gods awaited daily rituals, offerings of food, incense, and prayers. These rituals were vital to maintain Ma'at, ensuring cosmic order and the continued prosperity of Egypt. Temples were often aligned with stars or the Nile, reflecting the god's dominion over time and nature. Some, like the majestic Temple of Karnak, grew over centuries, each pharaoh adding their mark. Beyond worship, temples served as centers of learning, healing, and community life. They stored vast libraries, sacred texts, and treasures. Visiting a temple was a profound experience. The smell of burning incense, the chanting of priests, the flicker of oil lamps, all enveloped in silence and awe. It was a place where gods walked among men. The journey through the Duat. The Duat is the mysterious realm of the dead, a shadowy world beneath the living, filled with trials, magic, and dangers. When a soul entered the Duat, it faced a journey both perilous and sacred. The sun god Ra himself traveled the Duat every night, battling darkness and chaos before rising anew each dawn. The dead had to navigate through rivers of fire and fields of snakes, answer riddles, and face guardians who tested their worthiness. Texts like the Book of the Dead served as guides, offering spells, prayers, and directions to help souls avoid traps and find their path. The journey was long and fraught, but it promised transformation, the soul's rebirth into eternal life if it proved pure and strong. This voyage through the Duat was more than myth. It reflected Egyptian beliefs about life's challenges, death, and hope for renewal. The Book of the Dead. No exploration of ancient Egyptian myths is complete without the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions meant to guide the deceased safely through the afterlife. Each scroll was personalized, painted with vivid illustrations and hieroglyphs that told of dangers, divine helpers, and rituals. The book helped souls speak the words that would open doors, protect against monsters, and gain favor with the gods. It is not a single book but a tradition, evolving over centuries, reflecting changing beliefs and practices. For Egyptians, the Book of the Dead was a beacon of hope, a map through the unknown, assuring that even after death, the soul could find peace, justice, and eternal life. The inundation and planting. The heartbeat of ancient Egypt was the Nile River, whose annual flood, known as the inundation, was both a blessing and a miracle. Each year, as the summer heat swelled, the Nile would overflow its banks, depositing a thick layer of fertile silt across the lands. This natural cycle transformed the desert into a vast, lush garden. The Egyptians called this season Akhet, the season of flooding, which marked the beginning of their agricultural calendar. Farmers eagerly awaited the receding waters to begin planting crops like wheat and barley, which would sustain the civilization for months to come. The flood was unpredictable but crucial. Too little meant famine. Too much could destroy homes and fields. The inundation shaped everything: calendars, festivals, laws, and daily life. It was a time when nature and gods were deeply intertwined, for the Nile was seen as a divine force, a life-giver, and a source of eternal renewal. Fishing and food in ancient Egypt. The Nile was not only a source of water but also a vast pantry, providing abundant food to Egyptians through fishing and hunting. Fishermen cast their nets from boats made of papyrus reeds, catching fish like catfish, tilapia, and perch. Fishing was both a necessity and a livelihood, with fish often dried, salted, or cooked fresh. Besides fish, Egyptians hunted birds such as ducks and geese and gathered plants like lettuce, onions, and garlic. Bread, made from barley or emmer wheat, was the staple food, often accompanied by vegetables, fruits, and occasionally meat or fish. Food was not just nourishment but a ritual. Offerings of bread, beer, and meat were placed in tombs to sustain the dead, reflecting the belief in an afterlife where earthly comforts continued. Pottery, tools, and crafts. Ancient Egyptian life was also shaped by skilled craftsmanship. Pottery was essential for storing grain, water, and wine. Made from Nile clay, pots were molded by hand or wheel, then fired in kilns. Tools crafted from copper and bronze, such as sickles, knives, and chisels, were vital for farming, construction, and art. Artisans specialized in creating jewelry, furniture, and statues. Techniques like faience, glazed ceramic, produced bright blue and green amulets believed to hold magical powers. Crafts were often taught within families, passed down through generations, blending practicality with artistry, reflecting Egypt's sophisticated culture. Women in Egyptian society. Women in ancient Egypt enjoyed a surprising degree of respect and rights compared to many other ancient societies. They could own property, conduct business, and even inherit wealth. Some women rose to powerful positions, like Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's few female pharaohs. Daily life for women included managing households, weaving cloth, and participating in religious ceremonies. Motherhood and family were central roles, but women were also depicted as musicians, dancers, and artisans. Marriages were generally monogamous, based on mutual respect and affection, with contracts detailing rights and responsibilities. Women's clothing and jewelry were elegant and symbolic, highlighting beauty and status in society. Childhood and games. Childhood in ancient Egypt was filled with both education and play. Children learned practical skills from their parents, preparing for their future roles. Games were common and varied. Children played with dolls, spinning tops, and board games like Senet, which was both a pastime and a spiritual journey symbolizing the soul's passage. Toys were often made from wood, stone, or clay, and some were miniature versions of adult tools and animals. Education for boys could lead to careers as scribes or priests, while girls were trained at home. Childhood was a time of nurturing and learning, with stories and songs helping to pass cultural values. Egyptian homes and villages. Most Egyptians lived in simple homes made from mud bricks, built to keep out the heat. Villages clustered along the Nile, with houses close together, often sharing walls. Homes had flat roofs, small windows, and courtyards where families gathered. Furniture was minimal but functional: wooden stools, beds, and storage chests. Villages were centers of farming and craft, with workshops and granaries. Streets were often narrow and bustling with daily activity. The Nile provided water for drinking, cooking, and washing, and gardens grew near homes with vegetables and flowers. Community life was close-knit, with neighbors helping each other through festivals and hardships. Clothing, perfumes, and jewelry. Clothing in ancient Egypt was simple but elegant, designed for the hot climate. Linen made from flax was the primary fabric, worn as kilts by men and dresses by women. Fashion was also a sign of status. Nobles wore fine, sheer linen and elaborate jewelry made from gold, precious stones, and faience beads. Perfumes and oils were highly prized, made from fragrant plants and resins. Egyptians used them not only for scent but also for ritual purification and skincare. Jewelry was more than decoration. It carried magical protection and represented religious beliefs. Amulets of the scarab, Eye of Horus, and Ankh were common. Festivals and community. Festivals were vital to Egyptian life, blending religious devotion and social joy. Celebrations marked the flooding of the Nile, the New Year, and the birthdays of gods. During festivals, temples opened their doors to the public for processions, music, dance, and feasting. Communities gathered to share food, tell stories, and perform rituals, reinforcing social bonds and devotion to Marat. The Opit festival, for example, celebrated the god Amun with grand parades from Karnak to Luxor, uniting the people in a shared spiritual experience. Education and scribes. Education was essential, especially for boys destined to become scribes, the elite literate class. Schools, often attached to temples, taught reading, writing, mathematics, and religious texts. Scribes used reed pens and papyrus scrolls to record everything from laws to poetry. Scribes held prestigious positions, supporting the government, economy, and religion. Their training was rigorous, requiring years of study and practice. Literacy was rare, making scribes vital for preserving knowledge and administration. Stories by lamplight. As night fell and the Nile's waters grew still, families gathered by lamplight to share stories, tales of gods, heroes, and moral lessons. Oral storytelling was a cherished tradition, preserving myths and history through generations. These stories entertained and educated, weaving lessons of courage, loyalty, and the power of the gods into everyday life. The warm glow of oil lamps flickered as voices softened, creating a calm and timeless atmosphere where the past came alive. The Middle Kingdom awakens. Mentuhotep and the rise of Thebes. After centuries of turmoil and fragmentation following the Old Kingdom's collapse, Egypt entered a period of disarray known as the First Intermediate Period. The land was divided, power fragmented among competing warlords and local governors. The unity that had once bound Egypt as a singular, mighty kingdom seemed lost to time. Amid this chaos, a powerful figure emerged from the city of Thebes in Upper Egypt, Mentuhotep II. This ruler, whose name means Montu is satisfied, became the symbol of revival and restoration. He embarked on a mission to reunify Egypt, to bring peace after decades of strife. Mentuhotep's campaign was not just military but deeply symbolic. Thebes, once a minor town, became the new political and religious center. It was here that Mentuhotep declared himself pharaoh of a reunited Egypt, marking the dawn of what historians now call the Middle Kingdom. Under Mentuhotep, the foundations of stability were laid. The pharaoh portrayed himself as the restorer of Maat, the cosmic order and justice, promising to renew prosperity, peace, and divine favor. His reign lasted nearly 50 years, an era marked by both consolidation of power and cultural renaissance. Thebes flourished under his rule, growing into a majestic city with temples and tombs that celebrated the return of divine kingship. Mentuhotep's funerary complex at Deir el-Bahari is one of the earliest examples of monumental mortuary architecture, blending Old Kingdom traditions with innovative designs. The Middle Kingdom began not just as a political restoration but as a renewal of Egyptian identity, a time when the people believed that the gods had once again smiled upon their land. Art and architecture flourish. The Middle Kingdom's stability breathed new life into Egypt's art and architecture. While the grandeur of the Old Kingdom pyramids had faded, a fresh wave of creativity blossomed that balanced tradition with innovation. Artists embraced realism and emotion in their sculptures and paintings. Unlike the rigid and formulaic depictions of earlier times, Middle Kingdom art captured more naturalistic poses, showing kings and commoners alike with softer features and individualized expressions. Temples became centers of worship and social gathering, often built with finely carved stone blocks and adorned with intricate reliefs depicting gods, kings, and daily life. These sacred spaces grew larger and more complex, reflecting the deepening relationship between humans and the divine. Tombs evolved as well. The massive pyramids gave way to rock-cut tombs and mortuary temples, where detailed inscriptions and vivid wall paintings told stories of the deceased's journey in the afterlife. These tombs were carefully designed to ensure the soul's safe passage through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. One remarkable example is the funerary complex of Senusret III, whose statues portray a pharaoh both mighty and approachable, a ruler who bridged the mortal and divine worlds with strength and compassion. Craftsmen perfected techniques in jewelry, pottery, and furniture, producing works that combined utility with artistic flair. The Middle Kingdom's aesthetic influenced Egyptian culture for centuries, leaving a legacy of beauty, symbolism, and devotion. Reforms and literature. The Middle Kingdom was a time of significant reforms, especially in administration and governance. The pharaohs sought to strengthen central authority while allowing regional governors, known as nomarchs, to manage their provinces under royal oversight. Legal reforms promoted fairness and justice, reinforcing Maat in society. Judges became more prominent, and laws were codified to protect the rights of commoners and nobles alike. Alongside political change, literature flourished like never before. The Middle Kingdom saw the creation of some of Egypt's most enduring literary works, blending wisdom, religion, and practical guidance. Texts such as The Tale of Sinew offered gripping stories of exile, identity, and homecoming, reflecting the complexities of human emotion and loyalty. Wisdom literature, like the Instructions of Amenemhat, provided ethical advice, encouraging humility, hard work, and respect for authority. Religious texts expanded, with prayers, hymns, and magical spells designed to protect the living and guide the dead. Scribes and scholars became respected figures, preserving knowledge and enriching the cultural fabric of Egypt. Foreign trade routes. The Middle Kingdom's revival extended beyond Egypt's borders. Trade flourished, and Egyptian merchants established far-reaching routes that connected the Nile to distant lands. To the south, expeditions ventured into Nubia, bringing back gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals. To the northeast, merchants traded with the Levant, modern-day Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, exchanging Egyptian linen, grain, and crafted goods for cedar wood, copper, and luxury items. Sea routes in the Red Sea facilitated commerce with the mysterious land of Punt, a source of frankincense, myrrh, and precious stones. Trade was more than economic exchange. It was a conduit for cultural interaction, spreading ideas, technologies, and beliefs. These routes were often protected by military outposts and fortified settlements, reflecting the importance of securing Egypt's wealth and influence. Magic and amulets. Magic, or hika, was deeply woven into everyday life during the Middle Kingdom. Egyptians believed that words, rituals, and objects could influence the spiritual and physical world. Amulets, small charms worn by the living and buried with the dead, were powerful symbols of protection and blessing. Common amulets included the Eye of Horus, symbolizing health and safety, the scarab beetle, representing rebirth and transformation, and the Ankh, the key of life. Magic was practiced by priests, magicians, and even laypeople who recited spells to ward off evil, ensure fertility, or guarantee a safe journey through the afterlife. Texts like the coffin texts, inscribed inside coffins, provided spells and guidance to the deceased, replacing the earlier pyramid texts and making magic accessible to more people. The Middle Kingdom's rich magical tradition reflected Egyptians' deep connection to the unseen world and their desire to harmonize with the divine. Nomarchs and local rule. While the pharaoh held supreme power, the Middle Kingdom saw a complex relationship between the central government and provincial rulers known as nomarchs. These local governors managed their nomes, administrative regions, collecting taxes, maintaining order, and overseeing public works. Initially, nomarchs enjoyed significant autonomy, sometimes acting like small kings, which posed challenges to royal authority. Over time, pharaohs implemented reforms to curb this autonomy, appointing loyal officials and establishing stronger oversight. The balance between central control and local governance was crucial for maintaining Egypt's stability and prosperity. Nomarchs played a vital role in society, connecting the common people to the pharaoh and facilitating the smooth functioning of the kingdom. The rise of the Hyksos. Towards the end of the Middle Kingdom, Egypt faced new challenges from foreign invaders known as the Hyksos. Originating from the Near East, the Hyksos brought new technologies, including advanced bronze weapons and horse-drawn chariots, which gave them a military advantage. They gradually infiltrated and conquered parts of northern Egypt, establishing their own rule in the Nile Delta region. Their rise disrupted Egypt's stability and heralded the beginning of the Second Intermediate Period, a time of conflict and division. Despite their foreign origins, the Hyksos adopted many Egyptian customs and gods, blending cultures in a complex and dynamic way. The struggle against the Hyksos would eventually lead to the rise of the New Kingdom, Egypt's most powerful and expansive era. Weapons and warfare. The Middle Kingdom witnessed significant advancements in military technology and tactics. Bronze replaced stone for many weapons, including swords, daggers, and arrowheads, making Egyptian armies more effective and durable. The introduction of the composite bow allowed archers greater range and power. Chariots, introduced by the Hyksos, revolutionized warfare, enabling rapid movement and tactical advantage on the battlefield. Egyptian soldiers were organized into professional units, with training and discipline improving under royal supervision. Fortifications and defensive structures were built to protect key trade routes and borders. Warfare was not just physical but symbolic, with pharaohs portrayed as divine warriors maintaining Ma'at against chaos and enemies. The fall of the Middle Kingdom. Despite its achievements, the Middle Kingdom eventually declined due to internal strife and external pressures. Economic difficulties, political fragmentation, and the rising power of nomarchs weakened central authority. The invasion and settlement of the Hyksos in the north further fractured the kingdom. By around 1650 BCE, the Middle Kingdom had effectively collapsed, leaving Egypt divided once more. However, this period laid important foundations for future resurgence, with cultural, religious, and administrative traditions that persisted. The fall was not the end but a prelude to Egypt's next great age. The Silent Valley. The Silent Valley, also known as the Valley of the King's Predecessor, was a place of burial and mystery during and after the Middle Kingdom. As pyramid building declined, elite Egyptians turned to hidden tombs carved into cliffs and hillsides to protect the dead from grave robbers. These tombs were richly decorated with spells, images, and texts designed to guide the deceased safely to the afterlife. The Silent Valley was a sacred and secretive place, a refuge for souls amid changing times. Its silence speaks of reverence, transition, and the eternal hope for immortality. The New Kingdom, Empire and Glory. Ahmose and the Expulsion. The dawn of the New Kingdom was heralded by a powerful pharaoh named Ahmose I, a warrior king whose legacy is etched in Egyptian history as the liberator who drove out the Hyksos invaders. The Hyksos, having established their rule over the northern Nile Delta, had held Egypt in a grip of foreign domination for generations, disrupting the unity and prosperity Egypt once enjoyed. Ahmose, born into the royal family of Thebes, rose to power with a fierce determination to reclaim his country. His military campaigns were relentless, marked by sieges, battles, and strategic maneuvers that eventually forced the Hyksos to retreat. The expulsion of the Hyksos was not merely a military victory, it was a symbolic rebirth of Egyptian power and pride. Ahmose re-established Thebes as the political and religious heart of Egypt and began to rebuild the kingdom's shattered infrastructure. His reign laid the foundation for the New Kingdom, an era characterized by territorial expansion, monumental architecture, and a flourishing of arts and culture. Ahmose's victory was celebrated with grand festivals and commemorations, immortalizing him as the pharaoh who restored Marat, the divine order, and set Egypt on a path toward empire and glory. Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh. One of the most fascinating figures of the New Kingdom was Hatshepsut, a queen who boldly assumed the full powers of a pharaoh in a male-dominated society. She began her reign as regent for her young stepson Thutmose III, but soon declared herself king, adopting all the royal titles and iconography traditionally reserved for men. Hatshepsut's reign was marked by unprecedented peace and prosperity. She focused on trade, diplomacy, and monumental building projects rather than warfare. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari is considered one of the architectural masterpieces of ancient Egypt, harmoniously blending with the surrounding cliffs. She launched a famous trading expedition to the mysterious land of Punt, bringing back precious goods such as myrrh, ebony, and exotic animals, which enriched Egypt's wealth and prestige. Hatshepsut portrayed herself as a divine ruler, often depicted with the traditional false beard of pharaohs, symbolizing her legitimate authority. Her reign challenged conventions and left a lasting legacy, though after her death, many of her images were defaced or erased, reflecting complex political dynamics. Thutmose III, the warrior king. Following Hatshepsut, Thutmose III rose to become one of Egypt's greatest warrior pharaohs, often called the Napoleon of Egypt. His reign was marked by extensive military campaigns that expanded Egypt's borders further than ever before, reaching deep into Syria and Nubia. Thutmose was a brilliant strategist and tactician, known for his bold and decisive battles, including the famous Battle of Megiddo. His armies used advanced weapons and chariots, and he implemented effective logistics and intelligence gathering. Thutmose III's conquests brought immense wealth and tribute to Egypt, funding massive building projects and reinforcing his divine kingship. He also promoted arts, religion, and administration, ensuring the stability of his empire. The pharaoh's military successes secured Egypt's dominance in the ancient Near East for centuries. The splendor of Luxor and Karnak. The New Kingdom saw the rise of monumental temple complexes at Luxor and Karnak, which became religious and political centers of immense power. The Temple of Karnak, dedicated primarily to the god Amun-Ra, was expanded and embellished over centuries, becoming one of the largest religious complexes in the world. Its towering pylons, massive obelisks, and intricate reliefs celebrated the divine and royal power, telling stories of pharaohs, gods, and cosmic order. Luxor Temple, located nearby, was used for religious festivals, including the famous Opet Festival, which reinforced the pharaoh's divine legitimacy. These temples were centers of priestly activity, ceremonies, and administration, serving as the heart of Egyptian spirituality. The architecture reflected the grandeur and ambition of the New Kingdom, blending art, religion, and politics into a powerful symbol of empire. Akhenaten and the Sun Disk. In a dramatic shift from traditional Egyptian religion, Pharaoh Akhenaten introduced a revolutionary form of monotheism centered on the worship of the sun disk, Aten. Akhenaten abandoned the powerful priesthood of Amun and established a new capital city called Akhenaten, modern-day Amarna. His religious reforms emphasized the Aten as the sole god, portraying the pharaoh as the divine intermediary. Artistic styles changed dramatically under Akhenaten, becoming more naturalistic and expressive, showing intimate scenes of the royal family. Despite his bold vision, Akhenaten's changes were controversial and short-lived. After his death, traditional religious practices and gods were restored. Akhenaten remains a fascinating figure, representing one of ancient Egypt's most radical experiments in religion and governance. Nefertiti and her mystery. Queen Nefertiti, wife of Akhenaten, is one of ancient Egypt's most enigmatic and captivating figures. Her iconic bust, with its elegant features and regal bearing, has become a symbol of Egyptian art worldwide. Nefertiti may have played a powerful role in Akhenaten's religious revolution, possibly even ruling as a co-regent or pharaoh after his death. Despite her prominence, much about her life and fate remains unknown, sparking countless theories and debates among historians and archaeologists. Her legacy is wrapped in mystery, combining beauty, power, and intrigue, making her a lasting icon of Egypt's new kingdom. Tutankhamun's short reign. Perhaps the most famous of Egypt's pharaohs today is Tutankhamun, the boy king whose nearly intact tomb was discovered in the 20th century. Tutankhamun ascended the throne at a young age during the turbulent aftermath of Akhenaten's reign. His rule was brief, and he is believed to have died in his late teens, but he restored the old religious order, abandoning Aten worship. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings was filled with exquisite treasures, giving modern scholars unparalleled insight into New Kingdom art and burial practices. Though he was a relatively minor ruler in his time, the discovery of his tomb made Tutankhamun one of the most famous symbols of ancient Egypt. The Valley of the Kings. The New Kingdom pharaohs abandoned pyramid building and instead chose to be buried in the Valley of the Kings, a hidden necropolis on the west bank of the Nile. This valley became the final resting place for many great rulers, designed to protect tombs from looters and to serve as gateways to the afterlife. Tombs were elaborately decorated with spells, religious texts, and scenes depicting the journey of the soul. The valley's isolation and intricate burial architecture reflect the Egyptians' deep beliefs in death, resurrection, and eternal life. Excavations here have revealed incredible treasures and insights, shedding light on the grandeur and spirituality of the New Kingdom. Ramesses the Great. Ramesses II, often called Ramesses the Great, is perhaps Egypt's most celebrated pharaoh, reigning for over 60 years. His reign was marked by extensive building projects, military campaigns, and a powerful cult of personality. He constructed colossal temples like Abu Simbel and expanded Karnak, leaving behind a legacy of grandeur and authority. Ramesses negotiated one of the world's first known peace treaties with the Hittites after the famous Battle of Kadesh. He portrayed himself as a divine warrior and protector of Egypt, reinforcing his image through statues, inscriptions, and monuments. His long reign brought stability and prosperity, cementing Egypt's status as a superpower of the ancient world. The Battle of Kadesh. The Battle of Kadesh was a monumental clash between Ramesses II's Egyptian forces and the Hittite Empire, taking place around 1274 BCE. It is one of the best documented battles of the ancient world, with detailed accounts carved into temple walls. The battle was fought near the city of Kadesh in modern-day Syria, a strategic location controlling trade routes and territory. Although the battle ended inconclusively, Ramesses portrayed it as a great victory, using propaganda to bolster his image. The aftermath led to a peace treaty, establishing boundaries and diplomatic relations that lasted decades. The Battle of Kadesh symbolizes the height of Egyptian military power and the complex diplomacy of the New Kingdom era. The sacred rituals of death. Mummification step by step. In ancient Egypt, death was not seen as an end but as a transition to another existence. The preservation of the body was essential for the soul's journey through the afterlife, and this led to the development of mummification, a meticulous and sacred process. The ritual began shortly after death. The body was carefully washed with Nile water and purified with fragrant oils and resins. Next, the internal organs were removed because they were believed to decay quickly and needed separate preservation. The brain was extracted through the nostrils using specialized hooks, a delicate and often gruesome procedure, while the stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver were taken out via an incision on the left side of the abdomen. Each organ was embalmed separately and stored in canopic jars, guarded by the 4 sons of Horus, each protecting a specific organ. These jars were intricately decorated and inscribed with protective spells. The body cavity was then filled with natron, a natural salt, to dry the corpse thoroughly, a process that took about 40 days. This desiccation was critical to halt decay. Once dried, the body was wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen strips, coated with resin to glue the layers and protect the flesh from moisture and insects. Amulets and charms were carefully placed between the layers for protection and spiritual power. Finally, the mummy was adorned with a mask, often made of gold and precious stones for royalty, symbolizing the divine visage the deceased would assume in the afterlife. The entire process, performed by specialized embalmers and priests, was both technical and deeply spiritual, reflecting the Egyptians' profound beliefs about life after death. The role of priests. Priests held a vital role in the sacred rituals of death, acting as intermediaries between the living, the gods, and the deceased. Their responsibilities extended beyond mere performance of the rites. They ensured the proper invocation of spells, the sanctification of tombs, and the maintenance of religious order. Before burial, priests conducted purification rituals, cleansing the body and the tomb space with holy water, incense, and prayers. They wore special masks to represent Anubis, the god of embalming and protector of the dead, embodying his sacred role during mummification and funerary rites. Priests recited sacred texts from the Book of the Dead to guide the soul safely through the challenges of the underworld. During ceremonies like the opening of the mouth, priests performed symbolic acts to restore the deceased senses, allowing them to breathe, see, and speak in the afterlife. Their chants, hymns, and gestures were believed to empower the deceased, safeguard the tomb, and appease the gods. The priest's expertise in ritual purity and divine knowledge was crucial to securing eternal life for the departed. Burial rites and tomb design. The design and ritual of burial were intricately connected, with every element intended to honor the dead and facilitate their journey beyond. Tombs varied from simple pit graves to elaborate rock-cut chambers, depending on the deceased status and wealth. Royal tombs, such as those in the Valley of the Kings, were hidden to prevent robbery, while commoners were buried closer to villages in smaller, modest graves. The layout of tombs often reflected Egyptian cosmology, aligning with cardinal points and symbolic elements to assist the soul's resurrection. Chambers were decorated with scenes depicting the deceased's life, their interactions with gods, and spells from funerary texts. These images were not mere decoration but magical aids to empower and protect the soul. Burial rites included the placing of grave goods, objects the deceased might need in the afterlife, from food and clothing to furniture and tools. Family members participated in mourning rituals, offering prayers and gifts to honor and sustain the deceased. The entire burial ceremony was a communal event filled with reverence, grief, and hope for eternal life. Grave goods and offerings. The Egyptians believed that the dead would continue to live in the afterlife, needing many of the comforts and necessities from their earthly life. Thus, tombs were stocked with grave goods, ranging from everyday items like pottery, food, and clothing to luxurious objects like jewelry, furniture, and even boats. These offerings were carefully chosen to reflect the deceased's status and needs, ensuring a comfortable existence beyond death. Food offerings, often bread, beer, and meat, were symbolic sustenance for the Ka, the life force, which lingered in the tomb. Statues and Shabti figures were included to serve as servants or protectors for the deceased in the afterlife. Priests periodically renewed offerings in funerary chapels to sustain the dead spiritually. The presence of these goods was believed to maintain a connection between the living and the dead, reinforcing familial and religious bonds. The opening of the mouth ceremony. One of the most important and dramatic funerary rituals was the opening of the mouth ceremony. This ritual symbolically restored the deceased senses, enabling them to eat, drink, breathe, speak, and see in the afterlife. Performed by priests using ritual instruments, the ceremony involved touching the mouth and eyes of the mummy or statue. This act reanimated the spiritual faculties of the deceased, breaking the bonds of death. The ritual was accompanied by prayers and hymns to deities like Anubis and Osiris, invoking their power to grant new life. The opening of the mouth was a sacred bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, ensuring the dead could fully engage with their eternal existence. Sarcophagi and coffin texts. The sarcophagus, a stone coffin often ornately decorated, was the final protective vessel for the mummy. Sarcophagi were carved with religious symbols, images of gods, and inscriptions from coffin texts, spells intended to protect and guide the deceased. These texts evolved from earlier pyramid texts and became accessible to nobility and commoners, not just royalty. The coffin texts detailed magical formulas, prayers, and instructions for navigating the afterlife's dangers. The outer coffin was often nested with one or more inner coffins, each adding layers of protection. Together, the sarcophagi and texts served to guard the body and soul, ensuring safety and eternal life. Journey to the afterlife. The soul's journey after death was a central theme in Egyptian religion, filled with trials and divine encounters. The deceased spirit was believed to travel through the duat, the mysterious underworld realm governed by gods and supernatural beings. Along the way, the soul faced obstacles such as monsters, serpents, and tests of worthiness. Guidance came from spells and prayers inscribed in funerary texts and recited by priests. Successful navigation meant reaching the field of reeds, a paradise mirroring earthly life but perfect and eternal. The journey symbolized death as a transformation and rebirth, reflecting the cycles of nature and the Nile. The afterlife was both a reward and continuation, ensuring the deceased's place among the gods. Judgment Hall of Osiris. At the heart of the afterlife was the Judgment Hall, presided over by Osiris, the god of the dead and resurrection. Here, the deceased's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, symbolizing truth and justice. This ceremony, called the weighing of the heart, determined the soul's fate, eternal life or destruction. If the heart was lighter or equal to the feather, the soul was deemed pure and worthy. If heavier, burdened by sins, the soul was devoured by a mit, a fearsome creature part lion, hippopotamus, and crocodile. The judgment was a moral test, emphasizing living a just and balanced life. Successful souls were granted entry into the blessed afterlife, joining Osiris and the gods. Eternal Fields of Reeds. The fields of reeds represented the Egyptian ideal of paradise, a lush, fertile land where the soul enjoyed eternal peace and abundance. This afterlife mirrored the Nile's bounty, with endless crops, calm waters, and serene skies. Souls were reunited with loved ones and engaged in activities they cherished on earth, farming, feasting, and leisure. Unlike earthly life, there was no suffering, pain, or death. The fields of reeds symbolized the ultimate reward for those who passed the judgment, living in harmony with Ma'at forever. Whispers of the departed. Even after burial, the dead continued to influence the living world through whispers and prayers. Families maintained tombs, making offerings and speaking to their ancestors for guidance and protection. The departed were believed to watch over their kin, interceding with the gods. Tombs and funerary texts often included spells to communicate across the divide between life and death. This ongoing relationship bridged generations, blending reverence, memory, and spiritual connection. The sacred rituals of death ensured that life's journey did not end but transformed, weaving a timeless bond between the living and the dead. Wisdom of the scribes. The power of the pen. In ancient Egypt, the scribe held a revered and powerful position in society. Unlike many others, scribes possessed a rare skill, the ability to read and write. This skill granted them access to knowledge, administration, and religion, making them indispensable to the smooth functioning of the kingdom. Writing was not merely a practical tool. It was a sacred act believed to connect humans with the divine. The written word could invoke magic, preserve history, and communicate with gods and ancestors. Scribes were often educated in temple schools and served pharaohs, priests, and government officials. They recorded laws, taxes, religious texts, and stories, becoming the guardians of Egypt's wisdom. The pen was typically a reed brush dipped in black or red ink, used to write hieroglyphs, hieratic, or later, demotic scripts. This simple instrument wielded immense influence, as scribes shaped the administrative, spiritual, and cultural life of Egypt. How papyrus was made. Papyrus, the ancient Egyptians' favorite writing material, was crafted from the papyrus plant growing abundantly along the Nile's banks. The process of making papyrus was an art in itself. Workers would cut the stalks into thin strips, soak them in water, and then layer them in a crosswise pattern. These layers were pressed and dried, forming sheets of smooth, durable paper that could be rolled into scrolls. Papyrus was lightweight and portable, allowing scribes to carry texts, letters, and documents throughout the kingdom. Because papyrus was a precious resource, scribes learned to write efficiently, conserving space and materials. The invention and use of papyrus significantly advanced record-keeping, literature, and the spread of knowledge. The art of hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs were more than just a writing system. They were an artistic expression deeply intertwined with Egyptian religion and culture. Comprising hundreds of symbols, hieroglyphs represented sounds, ideas, and objects, creating a complex and beautiful language. This script adorned temple walls, tombs, statues, and papyrus scrolls, conveying stories of gods, kings, and everyday life. Learning hieroglyphs was a lifelong pursuit for scribes, requiring memorization and artistic skill. Each symbol held layers of meaning, and their arrangement followed strict conventions to maintain sacred order. The hieroglyphic script connected the written word with the divine, believed to possess magical power. Learning in temple schools. Temple schools were the heart of education for aspiring scribes. Boys, often from privileged families, began their studies here at a young age. The curriculum was rigorous, focusing on writing, mathematics, literature, and religious teachings. Students copied texts repeatedly to master hieroglyphs and hieratic script, learning from experienced priests and scribes. Discipline was strict, with physical punishment for mistakes or laziness. Beyond literacy, students were taught ethics, history, and the rituals that connected Egypt's past with its present. Graduates of temple schools went on to serve in temples, courts, and government offices, becoming pillars of Egyptian society. Scrolls, spells, and knowledge. Scrolls made from papyrus carried the vast knowledge of ancient Egypt, from administrative records to religious spells. Among the most famous were funerary texts like the Book of the Dead, containing spells to protect and guide souls in the afterlife. Scribes meticulously copied these texts, ensuring that knowledge was preserved and passed on through generations. Scrolls also held medical recipes, wisdom literature, and historical chronicles, reflecting the broad intellectual world of ancient Egypt. The act of writing spells was seen as magical itself, bringing protection, health, and success to the bearer. Tax records and grain storage. Efficient administration was vital for the kingdom's prosperity, and scribes played a key role in managing resources. They kept detailed tax records, documenting what each region owed to the pharaoh in goods and labor. Grain, the kingdom's staple, was carefully monitored, with records of storage, distribution, and reserves. These documents ensured fairness and accountability, preventing shortages and rebellion. Through precise record-keeping, scribes helped maintain Egypt's stability and wealth. Letters between friends. Scribes were also messengers and correspondents, writing letters that revealed personal relationships and everyday life. Unlike formal decrees, these letters often contained intimate details, expressions of affection, advice, and news. They provide historians today with a glimpse into the social fabric of ancient Egypt. Writing letters required tact and skill, balancing politeness with clarity. Some letters were exchanged between family members, while others connected distant officials and friends. These written words bridged distances and time, preserving human connections. Royal decrees and laws. The pharaoh's word was law, and scribes were tasked with recording royal decrees and legal codes. These documents regulated everything from property rights and trade to crime and punishment. Scribes ensured that laws were disseminated across Egypt, maintaining order and justice. They also recorded treaties and agreements with foreign powers, reflecting Egypt's diplomacy. The permanence of writing transformed ephemeral spoken commands into enduring edicts. Astronomy and calendars. Scribes studied the stars to develop calendars essential for agriculture and religious festivals. They tracked the heliacal rising of Sirius, signaling the annual Nile flood and the start of a new year. Accurate calendars helped plan planting and harvesting, vital to Egypt's survival. Astronomical observations were intertwined with mythology, linking celestial bodies to gods. Scribes recorded these phenomena, blending science with spirituality. Silent words on stone. Beyond papyrus, scribes carved hieroglyphs into stone monuments, temples, and statues. These inscriptions immortalized the deeds of pharaohs, gods, and important events. Stone writing was laborious and permanent, designed to last for eternity. Temples and tombs became libraries of carved words, telling stories in silence. Visitors would read these inscriptions, connecting past and present in a timeless dialogue. The art of stone inscription was a testament to the scribe's skill and the enduring power of the written word. Starting heading 9. Foreigners and decline, with all 10 subheadings in a detailed, calm, immersive long-form style. Foreigners and decline. Libyans and the fragmentation. As the new kingdom waned, Egypt's centralized power began to falter, leading to political fragmentation. One significant factor in this decline was the increasing influence of the Libyans. Originally from the western deserts beyond Egypt's borders, Libyan tribes gradually settled in the Nile Delta during the late New Kingdom and Third Intermediate period. These newcomers brought their own culture and customs, slowly integrating but also challenging Egyptian authority. Libyan chieftains gained control over parts of Egypt, particularly in the north, carving out their own domains. Egypt no longer stood as a unified kingdom but became a patchwork of competing powers. This fragmentation weakened the central government, making Egypt vulnerable to external threats and internal strife. The once great pharaohs struggled to maintain order, their power reduced to ceremonial roles while real control shifted to local rulers. The invasion of the Sea Peoples. Around the 12th century BCE, Egypt faced a terrifying external threat: the Sea Peoples, mysterious maritime invaders whose origins remain debated. These groups, described in Egyptian records, attacked coastal cities and disrupted trade across the eastern Mediterranean. The Sea Peoples launched devastating raids on Egypt's Nile Delta, challenging the authority of the pharaohs. Pharaoh Ramesses III famously repelled their invasion in a monumental battle, depicted on temple walls at Medinet Habu. Though Egypt survived these attacks, the invasions drained resources and contributed to political instability. The ongoing pressure from the Sea Peoples and other enemies marked the beginning of a slow decline in Egypt's imperial dominance. Assyrian domination. By the early 1st millennium BCE, Egypt's weakened state invited new foreign rulers. The Assyrians, a powerful empire from Mesopotamia, launched campaigns into Egypt during the 7th century BCE. Their domination was brief but brutal. Assyrian kings installed puppet rulers and controlled Egypt's wealth and trade routes. Cities were sacked, and the Assyrians imposed their military and administrative systems. Despite fierce resistance, Egypt became a vassal state under Assyrian oversight, its sovereignty severely curtailed. This period marked a significant departure from Egypt's glorious past and foreshadowed further foreign domination. The Nubians and the 25th dynasty. In a remarkable reversal of fortune, the Nubians, Egyptians' traditional southern neighbors, rose to power and ruled Egypt during the 25th dynasty. Hailing from the kingdom of Kush, the Nubian pharaohs embraced Egyptian culture, religion, and art. They restored temples, revived ancient traditions, and sought to reunify Egypt. Pharaohs like Pir and Taharqa left a lasting legacy, blending Nubian and Egyptian heritage. Their reign represents a fascinating chapter where foreign rulers became guardians of Egypt's cultural identity. Greek settlements in Egypt. The arrival of the Greeks marked another turning point in Egypt's history. Greek traders and settlers began establishing communities in Egypt from the late 1st millennium BCE, particularly in the Nile Delta. The city of Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, became the epicenter of Greek-Egyptian culture. Greek influence permeated administration, art, and scholarship. Greek rulers, notably the Ptolemies, governed Egypt, blending Egyptian and Hellenistic traditions. The presence of the Greeks introduced new ideas but also signaled the further erosion of native Egyptian power. The arrival of the Persians. The Persians, expanding their empire from the east, conquered Egypt in the 6th century BCE. Egypt became a satrapy under the Achaemenid Empire, with Persian governors overseeing the land. While the Persians allowed some Egyptian customs to continue, their rule was often harsh, provoking rebellions. This era saw increasing foreign control and cultural blending but also economic exploitation. Egyptians viewed Persian rule as a period of decline from their golden past. Daily life under foreign rule. Life for ordinary Egyptians changed under these waves of foreign domination. While rulers shifted, daily activities often continued unchanged. Farmers tilled the land, artisans crafted goods, and priests performed rituals. However, the presence of foreign administrators sometimes brought heavier taxation and new laws. Cultural exchanges enriched Egyptian society but also created tensions. Despite foreign rulers, the Egyptian people retained a strong sense of identity, clinging to traditions and religious practices. Declining temples and forgotten gods. As Egypt's political power waned, many temples fell into neglect. Financial resources dwindled, priests lost influence, and some gods faded from worship. Important religious centers like Thebes and Memphis saw reduced activity. Some older deities were overshadowed by newer beliefs brought by foreign rulers. This spiritual decline mirrored the kingdom's fading glory, casting a shadow over Egypt's sacred landscape. He lost native pharaohs. Even as foreign powers dominated, native Egyptian rulers briefly re-emerged. Dynasties like the 28th to 30th sought to restore independence and traditional rule. Pharaohs such as Nectanebo I and II built monuments and defended Egypt against foreign invaders. Despite their efforts, these native kings were often short-lived, struggling against superior foreign forces. Their reigns represent the final chapters of Egypt's ancient pharaonic tradition. He calm before the fall. The centuries leading to the rise of the Ptolemaic kingdom were marked by fragile peace and uncertainty. Egypt lingered in a delicate balance between tradition and foreign influence. Temples stood as silent witnesses to past grandeur, while the Nile flowed steadily, indifferent to human fate. This period, a quiet pause in Egypt's turbulent history, set the stage for the final transformation under Greek rule. The calm before the fall was the last breath of an ancient civilization poised to enter a new era. The legacy lives on. Alexander the Great and Egypt. In 332 BCE, a young and ambitious Macedonian king named Alexander the Great swept through Egypt on his conquest of the Persian Empire. Unlike many invaders, Alexander was welcomed by the Egyptians as a liberator from Persian rule. He founded the city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, a city that would become a beacon of culture, learning, and power for centuries. Alexander's brief time in Egypt marked the start of a new era. Though he never declared himself pharaoh, he embraced Egyptian customs and was hailed as a divine figure by the people. His vision was to blend Greek and Egyptian traditions, laying the foundation for the Hellenistic influence that would shape Egypt's future. The city of Alexandria was built with grand plans. Its famous lighthouse, the Pharos, would become one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Alexander's legacy was not only military but cultural and intellectual, setting the stage for Egypt's transformation in the centuries to come. The Library of Alexandria. The Library of Alexandria, founded in the early Ptolemaic period, symbolized Egypt's role as the world's intellectual hub. It was more than a repository of scrolls. It was a center of scholarship that attracted thinkers from across the Mediterranean and beyond. The library housed countless works on science, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and literature, making Alexandria a melting pot of knowledge. Scholars like Euclid, Archimedes, and Eratosthenes worked here, pushing the boundaries of human understanding. Though the exact fate of the library remains shrouded in mystery and legend, its influence on preserving and advancing ancient wisdom cannot be overstated. It represents the peak of Egypt's cultural legacy, a bridge between the ancient and the modern world. Cleopatra's reign and the Roman arrival. The last native ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra VII, is one of history's most captivating figures. Fluent in many languages and a skilled diplomat, she ruled during a time of political turmoil and increasing Roman influence. Cleopatra's alliances with powerful Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony aimed to preserve Egypt's independence. Her life, filled with drama and romance, ended tragically when Rome finally absorbed Egypt as a province after her defeat by Octavian, later Augustus. The Roman arrival marked the end of the ancient pharaonic era, but Cleopatra's legacy as a strong, intelligent woman endures as a symbol of Egypt's last stand against foreign domination. End of the Pharaohs. With the death of Cleopatra and Egypt's incorporation into the Roman Empire in 30 BCE, the line of pharaohs came to an end after thousands of years. Egypt was now governed by Roman prefects, and the ancient religious and political structures began to erode. Temples slowly lost their former glory, and the once mighty gods were replaced by new beliefs. However, the image and mystique of the pharaohs lived on in art, literature, and collective memory. The end of the pharaohs did not mean the end of Egypt's identity. Instead, it marked a transformation from an ancient civilization to a province within a vast empire, preserving echoes of its past glory. Christian Egypt and the Coptic Church. As the Roman Empire adopted Christianity, Egypt became a vital center for the new religion. The Coptic Church emerged, blending ancient Egyptian traditions with Christian beliefs. Monasteries flourished in the deserts, preserving ancient texts and fostering spiritual devotion. The Coptic language, derived from ancient Egyptian, became the liturgical language, linking the present to a distant past. Christian Egypt witnessed religious conflict but also resilience, maintaining its unique identity amid changing rulers and faiths. The Coptic legacy continues today, a living thread connecting modern Egypt to its ancient roots. Forgotten in the sand. For centuries after the fall of ancient Egypt's grandeur, many of its secrets lay buried beneath the desert sands. Temples, tombs, and monuments were covered by shifting dunes, lost to memory. Local villagers knew of these ancient sites but lacked the means or interest to excavate them. The stories of gods and pharaohs faded into myth and legend. This period of obscurity shielded Egypt's heritage from destruction, but also left it forgotten by the wider world. Rediscovery by explorers. The 18th and 19th centuries saw a renewed fascination with Egypt, sparked by explorers, adventurers, and scholars. Figures like Giovanni Belzoni, Howard Carter, and others began unearthing tombs and temples, revealing treasures and mysteries long hidden. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 captivated the world, reigniting interest in Egyptology. These explorers pieced together Egypt's past, inspiring awe and scholarly study that continues today. Napoleon and the Rosetta Stone. Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign, 1798 to 1801, brought Europe's attention to Egypt. Among the many artifacts discovered was the Rosetta Stone, inscribed with the same text in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs. This stone became the key to decoding ancient Egyptian writing, thanks to the work of Jean-François Champollion. The Rosetta Stone symbolizes the unlocking of Egypt's past, bridging millennia and allowing modern scholars to read the stories of pharaohs, gods, and ancient peoples. Museums and modern curiosity. Today, Egypt's artifacts and history are preserved in museums worldwide, from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo to the British Museum and the Louvre. These collections educate and fascinate millions, connecting people to an ancient world of mystery and achievement. Modern Egypt balances pride in its heritage with the challenges of preservation, tourism, and cultural identity. The story of ancient Egypt continues to inspire, reminding us of humanity's enduring quest for knowledge and meaning. Eternal whispers of the Nile. The Nile River, Egypt's lifeblood for millennia, still flows quietly through the land, a timeless witness to all that has passed. Its waters carry the memories of pharaohs, priests, and common people alike. The legacy of ancient Egypt lives on, not only in monuments and museums but in the very landscape and spirit of the country. In the soft murmur of the Nile's current, one can hear the eternal whispers of a civilization that shaped human history and will forever capture the imagination of the world.